Bubba the Black Sheep. The sky above Greendale Valley was a pristine canvas of blue, undisturbed by clouds. At first glance, the landscape below appeared just as serene. Rolling hills covered in lush green grass, a gentle stream winding through the middle, and a flock of sheep dotting the hillside like puffs of cotton. Look closer, however, and you would spot it. Amid the sea of white wool, one sheep was unmistakably different. Obsidian against alabaster, Bubba stood out like a period at the end of a long, meandering sentence. Born to ordinary white-fleeced parents, Bubba's arrival had been met with confusion and whispers. Farmer Williams had scratched his weathered head, inspecting the lamb's dark coat with a curious frown. "Well, I'll be," he'd muttered. "Haven't seen one like this in 20 years." The other sheep had kept their distance from the beginning. Sheep were creatures of sameness. They found comfort in uniformity, security in similarity. Onyx learned this early, watching through keen eyes as the flock moved as one entity, a collective consciousness that seemed to operate on instinct rather than individual thought. Onyx's mother loved him fiercely but couldn't protect him from the cold shoulders of the flock. His father, an old ram with a distinguished curling horn, would occasionally nod in acknowledgement when they crossed paths, but that was the extent of their relationship. When Onyx was young, he had tried to blend in, to be accepted despite his appearance. He would mimic the movements of the others, follow their grazing patterns, and even try to position himself in the center of the flock during rest periods. His efforts were in vain. The sheep would shift, creating a perfect circle of white with a noticeable gap where Onyx should have been. "It's not just the color," his mother had explained one evening as they rested apart from the others. "You think differently, Bubba. You ask questions. Most sheep don't like questions." And questions he had in abundance. Why did they always follow the same path to the stream? Why did they panic at the sight of Farmer Williams' border collie, Rusty, who had never harmed them? Why did they never venture beyond the stone wall that marked the boundary of their pasture? As the years passed, Bubba's isolation only deepened. The lambs born after him were taught to keep their distance. "That one's different," they'd hear their mothers whisper. "Best to stay with your own kind." Bubba found solace in solitary explorations. While the flock huddled together on one side of the pasture, he would wander to the edges, discovering hidden patches of clover, secret vantage points from which to observe the valley below, and quiet spots where the stream formed small pools, perfect for contemplation. One such day, as Bubba stood at the edge of the property, his gaze fixed on the distant hills, he noticed something peculiar. The stone wall that had always represented the boundary of their world had partially collapsed, leaving a gap just wide enough for a sheep to pass through. Onyx's heart raced with possibility. He glanced back at the flock, grazing peacefully under the midday sun, oblivious to his discovery. No one would notice if he slipped away for a short while. No one would miss the black sheep. The sensation of stepping beyond the wall was electrifying. The grass felt the same beneath his hooves, but somehow different, untethered, wild. Bubba moved cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as he realized that the world beyond was not filled with the dangers the older sheep had always warned about. Over the next few weeks, Bubba made a habit of his secret excursions. He explored the neighboring hills, discovered a forest with trees so tall they seemed to touch the sky, and even encountered other animals, rabbits, deer, and once a fox that watched him with curious yellow eyes before disappearing into the underbrush. During one such venture, as autumn painted the valley in hues of gold and crimson, Bubba climbed higher than ever before. From the summit of a steep hill, he could see far beyond Greendale Valley. The sight took his breath away, a vast landscape of varying terrains, dotted with farms, villages, and in the far distance, what looked like a town with buildings that gleamed in the sunlight. So absorbed was he in the panorama that Bubba didn't notice the approaching storm. The first drops of rain startled him out of his reverie. Looking up, he saw dark clouds rolling in with alarming speed. The wind picked up, bending the tall grass and sending leaves swirling around him. Bubba knew he should return to the safety of the pasture, but something compelled him to press on. Just a little further, he thought. Just a little more of this freedom before returning to his life of isolation. The storm intensified. Rain pelted down, soaking through his wool, and thunder rumbled overhead. Visibility decreased dramatically, and Bubba realized with a jolt of panic that he had lost his bearings. Every direction looked the same in the downpour, and the landmarks he had used to navigate were now obscured. As lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the landscape for brief moments, Bubba searched desperately for any sign of Greendale Valley or the stone wall. Hours passed, and Bubba found himself shivering, his dark wool heavy with water. Just as despair began to creep in, he caught sight of something moving in the distance. Squinting through the rain, he made out the unmistakable silhouette of another sheep, black as night, just like him. His heart leapt. Could it be possible? Another like him? With renewed energy, Bubba moved toward the figure. As he drew closer, he saw that it wasn't just one sheep, but a small group, 5 or 6, all with wool as dark as his own. They huddled together under the shelter of a large oak tree, dry and seemingly unaffected by the storm's fury. "Hello?" Bubba called out, his voice barely audible above the tempest. The sheep turned in unison, their eyes widening at the sight of him. The largest among them, a ewe with a distinctive white patch on her forehead, stepped forward. "Well, look what the storm's brought us," she said, her voice warm and welcoming. "Another wanderer. Come, get out of the rain." Bubba joined them under the tree, grateful for the respite from the relentless downpour. They introduced themselves: Ebony, the leader with the white patch; Raven, a stocky ram with kind eyes; Jet, a quiet, thoughtful ewe; Slate, an energetic young sheep; and Pitch, the oldest and wisest of the group. "We're what the white flocks call black sheep," Ebony explained with a hint of pride. "Each of us came from different farms, different flocks, but we all face the same rejection, the same isolation." "How did you find each other?" Bubba asked, still in awe at the discovery that he wasn't alone in his difference. Pitch chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. "We didn't, not exactly. We each found our way to the grove." "The grove?" "It's what we call our home," Raven explained. "A hidden valley just beyond those hills. It's a place for sheep like us, the different ones." As the storm began to subside, the group led Bubba over the hills to their sanctuary. The grove was everything they'd described and more. A lush, secluded valley protected by steep hills on all sides. A crystal-clear lake shimmered at its center, fed by a waterfall that cascaded down the northern cliff face. The grass was thick and sweet, untouched by any farmer's plow or sheep's teeth, save for this small, unique flock. "We live differently here," Ebony told him as they showed him around. "No shepherds, no dogs, no arbitrary boundaries. We make our own decisions, face our own consequences." "But isn't it dangerous?" Bubba asked, thinking of all the warnings he'd heard about wolves and other predators. "Life is dangerous everywhere," Jet responded softly. "At least here, we face those dangers on our terms, together." The days turned to weeks, and Bubba found himself settling into life at the grove. For the first time, he wasn't defined by his color or his questions. He was valued for his curiosity, his different perspective. The small flock didn't just tolerate his explorations and wanderings, they encouraged them, often joining him on new adventures. But as winter approached, bringing with it the first dusting of snow, Bubba found his thoughts increasingly turning to Greendale Valley and the flock he'd left behind. He thought of his mother, who had loved him despite his differences. He wondered if they missed him, if they worried about what had become of him. One evening, as the flock gathered around a small fire, Slate had discovered how to build, another advantage of their independence. Bubba shared his feelings. "I can't help but think about them," he admitted. "They may not have accepted me, but they're still family." The others exchanged glances. Finally, Pitch spoke up. "You're thinking of going back?" It wasn't a question, but Bubba nodded anyway. "Just to see them, to let them know I'm all right." "They might not welcome you," Raven warned, "and they certainly won't understand your choice to leave." "I know," Bubba said, "but I still need to go." The next morning, Ebony approached Bubba as he prepared for his journey. "Take this," she said, offering a small pouch woven from reeds. Inside was a collection of seeds, from the sweetest grasses in the grove. Perhaps they'll help the others understand what you've found here." With directions from his new friends, Bubba set off toward Greendale Valley. The journey was easier this time, no storm, and he had a clearer sense of the landmarks. As he crested the final hill, he saw the familiar pasture below, the flock grazing peacefully just as he'd left them. His return caused quite a stir. The sheep scattered at first, then gathered at a safe distance, watching him with suspicious eyes. Farmer Williams, who had given up Bubba for lost months ago, came running from his cottage, eyes wide with disbelief. "Bubba," his mother called out, breaking from the flock to race toward him. She nuzzled him fiercely, her eyes wet with tears. "We thought you were gone forever." Over the next few days, Bubba shared his stories with any sheep willing to listen. At first, only a few were curious, mostly the younger lambs who hadn't yet fully absorbed the flock's fear of difference. But gradually, others came too, drawn by the tales of freedom and discovery. He planted the seeds from the grove at the edge of the pasture, tending them carefully. When they sprouted, producing grass more lush and sweet than any in Greendale Valley, more of the flock began to take notice. "You don't have to be afraid of what's different," Bubba told them. "Sometimes what's different is exactly what you need." Not all were convinced. Many still kept their distance, content with the safety and predictability of their familiar routine. But a few, a young ewe named Cloud, an old ram who'd always seemed restless within the confines of the farm, and surprisingly, Bubba's father, began to ask questions, to look beyond the stone wall with new eyes. One day, as spring turned the valley a vibrant green, Bubba made his decision. He would return to the grove, to the place where he had found acceptance and purpose. But he wouldn't go alone. "There's another way to live," he told the assembled sheep. "A way where being different isn't something to fear, but something to celebrate. I'm going back to a place where I found others like me. Any who wish to come, who are curious about what lies beyond these walls, are welcome." In the end, 7 sheep chose to follow Bubba, a small number compared to the size of the flock, but significant nonetheless. As they set off, Farmer Williams watched from his porch, a thoughtful expression on his weathered face. He could have stopped them, could have sent Rusty to herd them back, but something in the confident stride of his once timid black sheep gave him pause. "Sometimes," he murmured to himself, "you have to let them find their own way." As the small group disappeared over the hill, the last sight of Greendale Valley was the patch of grove grass spreading slowly but steadily from the edge of the pasture inward. A reminder that different doesn't mean wrong, and that sometimes being the black sheep is exactly what you're meant to